It's been 20 years since the most powerful earthquake of the 21st century set off the devastating Boxing Day tsunami. It killed more than 227,000 people in 14 countries along the Indian Ocean. My guest today became very close to being one of those victims. Riley Kehoe, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you here. And you were just a kid when all of this happened. You know, your book, 3 Seconds of Courage, was absolutely amazing. I know it's hard to go back and talk about that day, but tell me about that day.
Yeah. So I was 10 years old, and my grandfather actually used to live half the year in Thailand and half the year in Italy. And so Christmas time he was in Thailand. So my family would go every year to go and visit him. And so we took this family holiday to Thailand, and then we were working at an orphanage for a few weeks. And then after all of this, my grandfather had booked us to go to this cute little island off the coast of Thailand. Thailand is beautiful. And so we jump on this boat and we're pulling up to this island, and there's I just remember being this 10-year-old little girl on the front of the boat, and there's just fish everywhere, crystal clear water, and there's huge cliffs on these islands. We pull up and we spend Christmas Day there. And then the day after Christmas, I'm just soundly asleep in my bed, and all of a sudden my bed starts shaking. And I'm wondering what's going on. I thought my sister was underneath my bed, pulling a prank. And so I jump under my bed, looking under, and the whole ground is shaking. And I realized, I think this is an earthquake. I remember learning about it in primary school. And so I run down the hallway to my parents' room, and I'm like, what's going on? Mom and Dad, what's going on? And my mom is like, honey, it's an earthquake, don't worry. And the moment she says that, the earthquake stops, the whole ground stops shaking. But there's now things off, have fallen off the wall. And my mom calls the reception, and we find out it was just a one-off earthquake. They don't really know why, but you're fine, carry on with the day. And so we go and we go to breakfast, and we're carrying on with the day. But then later on, just before noon, that's when my whole life changed. And my sisters and I were playing on the beach, and my dad comes, and he comes to pick us up to take us back to our room. And it's crazy how God, he's in the details of everything. Yeah. And I love looking back on this moment and realizing there were so many coincidences. There were so many small miracles in which God chose to remain anonymous, because we had booked this holiday. My grandfather had booked a year in advance, and he booked beachfront bungalows, and we'd gotten there on Christmas Day. They had mixed up our bookings and given us middle of the island concrete floor, top floor apartments. Wow. Or even an hour after this moment where my dad's about to come and take us back to the room, my parents were going to go rock climbing. But my sisters and I were going to be down on the bottom, just playing on the sand. And so my dad comes up to us, and he's like, girls, we're heading back to the room. I need to get ready for rock climbing. We start walking back, and my mom's at the reception that's on the front of the beach, and she's calling the airline. And all of a sudden, I noticed something was really, really odd. There's tons of wild animals on this island, monkeys and birds and dogs. And I remember this one little dog yelped and started running into the bushes, and all the monkeys started making these wild noises and running up the cliffs and climbing up the cliffs, up the trees, up the cliffs. And I'm like, what's going on? And it was you could tell all the animals knew something was happening. Wow. And then it got eerie quiet. The only voice you could hear were human voices. And so we keep walking back to our middle of the island concrete floor apartment, and I all of a sudden hear people start yelling at the top of their lungs and screaming, sounds of horror. And I look to my dad, and I'm like, Dad, what's going on? And we're standing there with my dad and my 2 younger sisters. And I look back, and this is such a small area where even though we're in the middle of this island, you can see the beach from where we are through the palm trees. And there, all the water had left. And it had left so quickly that there's fish flopping around on the ground, and you can see in the distance is this thin white line, and people are just running into each other. And I'm like, Dad, where's Mom? And my dad, all of a sudden I hear, like a little girl who recognizes her mom's voice, I hear my mom yelling, "Run!" Because she saw and she knew exactly what was going on. So she starts yelling, "Run! Run!" and telling people, because some people start running out towards the ocean, and like it's chaos, no one knows what's going on. And so my dad, we stayed there, and my mom starts running down, and my mom is this confident, bold woman, but I remember looking in her eyes and being like, she's afraid. And as this 10-year-old little girl, I'm like, my mom's scared. I'm starting to feel scared. And so we gather as a family, run to the other side of the island, and the only way to get here is by boat. And so now there's all these boats that are on the ground or on the sand or on the reef. And there's this one man, and it's just this sight I'll never forget. He climbs out of his boat and starts running to the shore, thinking maybe he'll make it to high ground. And now we see behind him is a 50-foot tsunami, like over a 25-meter tsunami. Wow. And it's so strong, the whole ground is shaking. And the force, and it's coming fast, and the force of it is just, you can feel it all around us. It's coming to destroy. And so this man, he gets out of his boat, hoping to make it to high ground, realizes he's not going to. The tsunami is getting closer and closer, and he has to make this decision within a few seconds. So he turns around, runs back onto his boat, I think hoping to like hide in his boat, and he climbs back on, and the tsunami hits him and his body just fly to 1,000 pieces. And I remember just standing there and realizing I might not live today. Like this is a moment when I realized like death is so close. And so my family, we start running, and my mom looks at me, and another crazy God coincidence is the day before we'd gotten lost, and we found a pathway up one of the cliffs, because the way that this island was structured was flat in the middle and had two big cliffs on either side. So we found a pathway up the cliff the day before. And so my mom was like, "Riley, we have to find that path." And it kind of felt like God was just guiding us, because I just somehow remembered how to get there. And so we start running up there, and the tsunami wave is just destroying everything in its path. It's getting closer and closer and closer. We start running, we find the path, start running up it, and my mom is holding one sister, my dad is holding the other sister, and I'm the eldest, so I'm running as fast as my 10-year-old little legs can. There's sweat going down my back, my heart is racing, and I just feel so much fear in my body. And I look behind, and I wish I never did, because I just saw this sight of just this tsunami just coming and just destroying everything and everyone in its path. And
how close was it at that point to you?
At this point, we were like a few cars distance from it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so and it was this moment where I was just like, I wanted to stop. I just wanted to fear was taking over my body. I just wanted to sit there and like freeze. Fear, we all respond to fear so many different ways. I just wanted to freeze just then. And I hear my dad, and he's like, "Riley, run." And he's ahead of me up the path, and I just had to focus on the voice of my father. And I turned my head away from the tsunami and just start running as fast as I could. And it got to this point where the tsunami was as close as you are to me. That's how close death was to me.
You make it to the top.
Yeah.
And you have a moment with God there. What happened when you hit the top and you saw the wave had stopped?
Yeah, so we ran to the very top, and we're now like hundreds of feet high, so there's no way the wave could reach us. And I just fall down to my knees, and I cry out to God as this 10-year-old little girl who had just witnessed something so horrible. And it felt like God's presence was like this blanket that wrapped around me. And I felt this tangible experience with God in a place that doesn't make sense, in a place of death and destruction. There's God meeting me. And like, I just had this feeling like everything is going to be okay. Like I just felt that peace that transcends all understanding in the middle of chaos. And it was just such a tangible moment. And if you ask my little sister, like I was 10, she was 5. The only thing she remembers from that day is me praying as we were running up the pathway.
Wow.
And I just knew, like, I didn't understand what was going on. It would take me years to process what had happened and what was about to happen. And yet I knew God was my safe place.
There's so much to unpack here, and I wish we had more time, but I know the book you wrote about this is called 3 Seconds of Courage, and it's really what you learned, even afterwards becoming a lifeguard, facing your fear of the water. Talk to me about what that means to you, 3 seconds of courage.
Yeah. Well, I remember, that day 3 waves struck and hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. And we were also stranded on the island for a week with limited food and water. And I was terrified. And I remember 6 months after the tsunami, my parents enrolled me, as you mentioned, in beach lifeguard training to teach me the more that you face your fears, the less power fear has over you. And on that first day of training, I'm like just nervous pee, my hair is a mess, and I'm like, I do not want to go lifeguard. Like, it's the last thing I want to do. I'm terrified of the ocean. Like, I don't want to go to lifeguard training. And so my dad gets down on his knees and he looks me in the eye and he's like, Riley, you are fighting a battle between courage and fear, and all you need is a little more courage. And that just idea of what my dad said in this moment that I needed it has just caused a ripple effect on my life. And so that summer when I would be standing on the sand in front of the ocean and I did not want to get in the ocean. I'm so scared. I just wanted to turn around and run back and go climb my bed. I just started counting to 3. I'd be like, all right, on 3, you're going to step into the water. And then it became this thing that I would use outside of the beach. It became something that when I was scared to like share in class, and like I'm partially deaf, and so when I was growing up, I had years and years of speech therapy, and I would stand in front of my classmates, and my teacher would ask me to read the chapter, and I don't want to. I would count to 3, and I knew that the moment I said 3, it was like a promise to myself. I'm going to do the very thing that I'm afraid of, even if I'm scared, and I'm not going to let fear be the driver of my life. Like, I'm going to have a little more courage right now.
What an incredible life motto. And, you know, the trauma that you experienced at 10, it took you a long time to unpack it. Part of that is our faith community. Like, you felt pressure. Your parents were in ministry. You felt that pressure to always be happy and be on. So what took you to the place where you finally began to really unpack what was like post-traumatic stress disorder, essentially?
Yeah, because after something like that, our bodies like experience it all so different. I had nightmares and I get flashbacks, and there was a lot of time that I needed to heal. But what really helped me, other than like my like parents' just encouragement that I could do it and that I could live a life of courage, even though I've lived through something so fearful, were a few things. One, it was just, as a little girl, I would run outside and go visit my pony and like just would share all my feelings with my pony. And it's just like, as a little kid, you just like needed a safe place, and that was it. That's right. But more importantly, I would get up every morning and spend time with the Lord. And I would journal all my feelings to him. And I just knew that Jesus is the best therapist you're ever going to find. And then I think really what really helped my healing so much was when I was 22. I just moved from New Zealand, that's where I grew up, to LA, and I was at Fuller Seminary, and I had met with, for the first time ever, a spiritual mentor, and she just started meeting with me on a regular basis every few weeks, and just was this guide to teach me how to just unpack what I had lived through and realize God was always with me, that even so many people go through something, their own tsunamis, but the Holy Spirit like promises to never forsake us and never leave us. And so like imagining God being with you, and then also asking God, like, what do you think of the tsunami, and what do you want me to, like, how can I live with 3 seconds of courage today? Like, it was just like I had to learn through my spiritual mentor just to be fully dependent on God. And to really not let fear drive my life.
So good. And, you know, if you hadn't faced your fear of the water, learning to be a lifeguard, one man wouldn't be alive today.
Yes.
So can you unpack that story a little bit?
Yeah. So it was several years ago. And I ended up at this point, I was 22 years old. I'd been a lifeguard for a long time. And I was studying law at the university in New Zealand. I go away one weekend I love people. So I was like, I have to like get myself away from people. And like, I went away to our family's beach house, which is kind of like in the middle of nowhere. It's like up on a mountain, but overlooking the ocean. There's like a beach there. And so it was a stormy day, and I was like, I had just been reading about contract law all morning. I was like, I need a break. So I go down to the beach, and it's like rainy and stormy, and there's like rip tides, but I'm like, I just want to go in the ocean, because now the ocean is my favorite place to be. And now I love surfing. And so I was like, I'm just going to swim in the ocean. I go out there, and then I'm like, it's dangerous. And so I come back in, and I'm like, I shouldn't be out here, because I look down the beach, I'm the only person there. And it's this like stormy day in a small beach town in New Zealand. And so I'm sitting there, but for some reason I felt like I shouldn't leave yet. So I stood on that beach with my hoodie on my head, and I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, I hear somebody yelling at the top of their lungs, "Help!" And I look out, and there's a man, and he's in the ocean, and the water's about up to his chest, and he's pointing out to somebody further out in the ocean. And I see there's a man that's drowning, and he has been now caught just beyond the waves, where the waves are breaking. And instantly, like, my training just kicks in. And the crazy thing was, I had like my fins with me, my flippers, which just help with swimming. And like, I didn't even know why I brought them, but God's just in the details of everything. And so I grab these fins, and I start running, and I stop right before I get to the beach, to the water. And I just knew, I was like, it just was, everything there was kind of reminding me of the day of the tsunami. And I was just experiencing fear again. I was like, no, 1, 2, 3. And then I jumped in. I start swimming towards this man. As I'm getting closer and closer to this man, I realize he's spending more time with his head in the water than his head above the water. And he's like, what we call it's like climbing the ladder, where he's like trying to keep his head up, but he's just not able to. And so then when I'm about 50 meters away from this man, I realize he has his head only in the water. And I'm swimming as fast as I can and praying as I'm swimming, and just keep counting to 3 and just asking, Lord, I need your strength right now. And I go up to this man, and I shout at him, no response. And I put my hand on his neck, and there's no heartbeat. And I realize this man has completely drowned. And so I grab him, and I'm like, Lord, this man's life will not be over. I need you to come and do a miracle right now. And I pull him, and he's a like 200-pound plus man. I pull him onto my chest, and I start CPR on him in the middle of the ocean. And we had practiced this in training before. It was the first time I'd ever done it in real life. Wow. And so I'm pounding on his chest, and he's for a minute, no response, nothing's happening. And then another minute goes by, and I'm still praying in my head, pounding as fast as I can, and doing compressions and performing CPR in the ocean. And then all of a sudden he throws up. And I put my hand, and I can feel it, like this boom, boom, the tiniest little heartbeat. But there was like this hope, like there he is, life came back. Wow. And so I start pulling him back into the ocean, back into the shore. And then it was incredible. Like, there happened to be the one and only local doctor walking down the beach at that time. He saw me swim out to that man and thought, like, dear God, there's going to be 2 deaths today. He had called the ambulance, preparing the ambulance to pick up 2 bodies. But I never got to know that man's name. He went in the ambulance. He was a German tourist, but he is alive and well to this day. And it's just what happens when we turn the very place we fear into a place of victory and impact.
Yeah, I think we don't always know what is on the other side of us facing the thing that scares us to death.
Yeah.
Right? For you, it was that man's life, and he wouldn't be alive today if you hadn't done those 3 seconds of courage. I'm thinking of somebody watching right now who's always stayed away from public speaking or doing missions or something that God's calling them to do with their life because of fear. Maybe it's marriage, maybe, failed relationships, you don't want to try again. What would you say to that person who fear has really been the obstacle for their life?
Yeah, I would remind them that the thing that got me out of my fear, out of like living a life where fear is just gripping you and holding you from, like, because truly the difference between the life that you want and the life you're currently living is often your relationship with fear. And so I would encourage them. The thing that motivated me was not that I could do it, it's that I could do it for others. It's the impact that you could have on other people. It's like choosing to book that. My husband and I just did like 10 months of missionary work around the world, and we sold everything and just packed our bags and just trusted God as we traveled. And I was scared, but I knew this isn't about Riley. This isn't about my husband, Jack. This is about the impact that we can have on others. And like behind you facing your fears is always the gift of helping somebody else.
Wow.
And I remember when I did a TEDx talk a few years ago, and this girl came up to me afterwards and was like, Riley, and shared that she had a similar fear of the ocean, and she was like, now like I want to go to a surf camp. And it's just like when you realize like I'm not going to let fear run my life, I'm going to face my fears and live a life of courage. Do it not for yourself. Do it for your daughter. Do it for the person who is currently wrestling with the same fear that you are experiencing.
Oh, so good. I could just talk to you forever. You're so inspiring, Riley. The book is 3 Seconds of Courage by Riley Kehoe. Make sure you get a copy of this book. It is unput-it-downable and so inspiring when you talk about fear. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for facing your fear and the inspiration you are being to so many other people.
Thank you for having me.